Talia, should I start? Is it okay?
Yes, I'm sorry for this. Nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Talia. I'm the new Director of Education and Engagement at Mayan. So please, Rachel, thank you so much.
Of course. Okay. Thank you, Talia. It's nice to meet you. And I'm really glad to see you here, everybody. It's been a time when it's very important to be together in any way we can. I want to first ask you, are your families safe? All of your families? I'm glad to hear that. It's been scary to call people the past week and a half, because you call someone and you don't know if you're calling someone who's mourning or who's just angry about the situation, or who has someone they are waiting to see whether they're lying, being identified, or beyond the border. So it's been very scary. You call people and you don't know what situation you're walking into. I can say, just like, kind of dispatch from the ground, that, like I said already, but I'll repeat that our family is safe and well as can be. My brother-in-law is serving in Jenin, and we're praying for his safety. So we spent a lot of the past week and a half helping my sister care for her 5 sons, while also being expected to do her full-time job as a social worker, counseling women who are already depressed with postpartum depression. So as you can imagine, it's triggering and difficult. In my community that I belong to here in Jerusalem, most of the men were cold. So it's been a little bit challenging during the week to get a minyan in an odd and uncomfortable way. The shul group the shul is very strong. The community is very strong. Everybody, no matter what their situation, are focused on doing good things for others. Soldiers here need this, family here need that, evacuees here need this, little, the kids of the community looking for what to do. What can they do today? What can they do today? Who needs to bake cookies for what? And who needs babysitting? And who needs help? And it's just this kind of overflowing the banks of anything we could have imagined. The feeling of everybody around us wanting to do something. The rabbi of the shul, David Ansbacher, lost his nephew in the very first day, in the very first attack. His nephew, Amichai Vitzen, may his memory be blessed, was in the group in Kitat Konenut, the group of men who are responsible to defend a yishuv, like a town, or how would you even call it? I'm not sure. It's not a settlement because it's not beyond the 67 borders, but it's a small, like a village. Sorry, I'm thinking clearly and finding the right words has not been easy. So, and he and 8 of his friends really held off the terrorists for 8 hours on their own before the army was able to make it through the hundreds of terrorists ambushing on the roads for 8 hours. And then he and one other kibbutz member Moshav member were killed in the fighting. So this whole week, our rabbi and his wife have been going on back and forth kind of to the Shiva, at the same time trying to keep normalcy in the community, trying to keep the community going. Every day, a rabbi records a short video of himself sharing some uplifting idea. It's been really a time where people's mettle, where people's strength has been shining through. All of which doesn't change the fact that it's been horrible. But it's been just terrible all around. And the pain and the devastation has been, I don't need to tell you, you're experiencing it right there with me. We're all in it together. We're all one flesh and one heart, right? And it's been having sirens occasionally here in Jerusalem has not been helpful, even though I'm very happy to say that so far, and may continue, Iron Dome has been successful, and the people behind Iron Dome have been successful in intercepting. So if you want to help by writing your congressman letters saying how grateful you are to America for aiding Israel with the Iron Dome, it might not go amiss. But, with all your strength in the world, when you're running downstairs with a child you had to take out of the shower and wrap in a towel, and your other kid is scared, and your neighbor is scared and crying, and there's and trying to keep everybody's spirits up is very, very difficult. It's been a full-time job, more than a full-time job. However, I don't want to stay just in the place of sharing, even though I have to tell you, it's kind of cathartic for me to share this with you and be in it together. I want to look at it. In Hebrew, we would say be'enaim emuniyot, through the eyes of faith. And I'm not calling it through religious perspective, because it's not about religion. It's not about observance. It's about like faith. It's about what's inside. What do we believe? What do we see? What are the things we notice? And I want to share with you some thoughts that gave me strength, or gave me the stamina to put one foot in front of the other. And then I would like to open it a little bit for discussion also, and hear what's keeping you going these days. When it started on Shabbat Simchat Torah, which, as you know, here in Israel, it's one day, right? Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are one day, and they're both on Shabbat. And it's one of my favorite days of the year. I love dancing with the Torah. I love being there for it. And I think that on some deep level, I love it because it's our holiday. It's not a holiday that God told us, here, have this holiday. Or the rabbis, some big rabbis in the time of the Mishnah, right, said, no, it's a folk holiday that came really from the bottom and grew and became entrenched. I'm talking of Simchat Torah, specifically not Shmini Atzeret. And there's something about it, about this passion to express our love and our enthusiasm for Torah, that moves me very deeply. So Micha, my husband, and my old son Yehuda, who many of you know, already left. It was 8-something in the morning. And I was just organizing my little children and the stuff we had to bring for the Kiddush and Shul, and we were about to walk out the door when the siren went off. And to be perfectly honest, I thought it was a fluke, because I didn't hear anything on the news leading into Shabbat that there's some tensions or anything. It was just like, why would it go off? What's going on? So I told the kids, don't panic. It's okay. We'll do the right thing. We're going to go down to the basement of the building. This is what you do. And there's Azaka, but probably it's a mistake. So I opened the door and I see all my non-observant neighbors just running down the stairs. I'm like, okay, never mind. Let's go. Time to go. And I sent my kids, but I actually stopped. I stayed because I went to help a neighbor who's bedridden to close the shutters in their room and things like that. And because I delayed, other neighbors started talking to me, and they started saying things that didn't make sense to me, that terrorists took over Jewish villages and are not letting the soldiers go in for it. It all sounded totally fantastical. In my mind, I thought, okay, this is rumor mongering. Maybe one soldier is stuck somewhere and the terrorists are not letting people come and treat him or something. Like, it just, the scale of it didn't make sense. What became very clear, though, from everything I heard, was that we are in a state of war, and I need to think very carefully about what we're doing next. I said, okay, I'll go to Shul. Shul is 2 minutes away from our house. It's within, if I would run, I would make it one way or another within the minute and a half we have from the moment the Iron Dome siren goes here until hitting. So I said, we'll go there. We'll talk to the people, the men. There are many men in the shul who are army people. They would know what we're supposed to do, whether we should close ourselves at home or be in the shul. We went to shul, and our shul is outdoors, but everybody's crammed themselves into the safe space, and they kept going. And we all stayed there, except the men who were called by their units to leave right from shul, or the families with very young children who didn't even make it yet, so just stayed at home to be safe. We all stayed there in a crammed space, and we danced with the Torah, and we sang, and our singing mingled with the sirens going above our heads and the booms of interception. But we knew that we're in a safe space and that we're together, and we're dancing as an act of defiance. in the face of it all. And 2 songs that we sang really stayed with me. One was we sang Ifdu et Hashem b'simcha, worship God with joy, with simcha, like Simchat Torah. And as we were singing that, the siren was wailing and wailing, and we all raised our voice and we really put everything we have into this dance. And it was the most pure defiance of, you're not going to take simcha from us. And I've been remembering that moment through this week when, after Shabbat, when we turned on our phones and the scale of the devastation became apparent. And then as more news trickled in and like the scale just ballooned beyond what we even imagined, I kept thinking, where is my joy right now? I can't feel joy, but I felt like it was a promise I made, less to God, frankly, than to myself, that I will find this joy, that they will not take this away from me. They can cause us great devastation and great sadness and mourning, and they can cost us many, many lives, but they can't take away our joy forever. It'll have to come back. So that's been one thing that's been holding me in this time. The other song that really struck me, and I didn't know at the time why, was the beautiful psalm, S'u she'arim rashechem ve'inasu pitchei olam, right? I actually brought it. Talia, can you make me co-host so I can share things on my computer, please? In the meantime, I'll explain just in words. It's the beautiful psalm where we say, gates, raise your heads. Okay, here, thank you, Talia. Here, let's just go into it so I don't butcher the translation here. Oh, it's just a minute. Here, we're singing in Psalm 24. O gates, lift up your heads, up high, you everlasting doors, so the King of glory may come in. Now, it's a big favorite with children. I don't know about you, but in our shul, all the mothers hold their hands like, as a gate, and the kids get to go under it, and it's a big favorite. For some reason, it really struck me, and I kept trying to understand why. Why is this the song that echoes in my brain? I thought maybe it's because we're crossing a threshold into a new era, into really a new time that we can't understand and can't comprehend. And there's this feeling of crossing through the gate. But that felt too, fanciful. It felt like it's the kind of thing that you come up with later when you try to explain to yourself your idea is not something that really captures the truth. So I said, okay, let's look into it. Let's see, what does it mean? What are these gates? And I want to invite you to go with me on a little interpretational journey through history into different insights that people offered into this. What are these gates? And you will see, I think, as I did, that it really relates very, very profoundly to where we're at. The most, perhaps, rooted in the interpretation that's probably rooted in very ancient tradition and midrashic ancient tradition is Rashi's interpretation. Rashi is in France in the 1st century of the previous millennia, odd to say that, in a country that had so many moments of kicking out its Jews, forgive me, that when you look for the expulsion of French Jewry, like Google asks you for clarification of which one you're talking about. It's not like the Spanish expulsion. So Rashi is sitting there, this brilliant man who wrote Pirush on almost all the tractates of the Talmud and on all the Torah and just so much more. And he's looking at this pasuk and relying on a very ancient midrashic tradition. He says, we're talking here about the actual, literal, physical, brick and mortar, well, really stone and mortar, gates of the temple. And the song is capturing the moment when Shlomo, after having built the temple, brings in Aron HaKodesh, the tabernacle, the Aron HaKodesh, I'm sorry, like I said, that words are just not easy for me, right? The ark, thank you, Diana. The Ark of the Covenant. He's bringing the Ark of the Covenant in this celebratory moment into the temple. And it turns out that he built the gates exactly at the height of the ark, so the ark can't go in. You need to have a little bit of free space between them. So he's singing to the gates, and he says, raise gates your tops, open you openings of the world, so the King of glory may come in. Now, I think what Rashi is saying here is deeper. This is what Rashi is saying, but if you will allow me to write Rashi on Rashi, I think Rashi is tapping into something deeper here. Namely, that the whole idea that God can be contained in a physical place is ridiculous, is absurd. And in many ways, this is what this psalm is about. If you look at its beginning, it starts by saying here, the earth is the Lord's and all that it holds, the world and its inhabitants, for he founded it upon the ocean, set it on the nether streams. Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? So already there in the opening lines, there's this a little bit of tension between the idea that God created everything. God is everything, beyond everything. And then like he has one holy place that he's supposed to fit into, and then people can come into and visit him. I mean, we're familiar with this contradiction, right? It's not shocking. We're familiar. We're living with it as Jews. It's woven throughout all of our liturgy, our texts, our stories from time immemorial. Or memorial, we do remember that, actually. I shouldn't say that. From the beginning of our national story. And in a sense, maybe what Rashi is hinting at when he talks about Shlomo singing to the gates, it's more than just this particular gate needs to be tall enough for this particular art of the covenant to go through. It's like somehow we need to beg the physical space to be capable of containing God, because it's an impossible thing. And we need to pour our desire for closeness with God, our singing, our yearning into it to make it even a little bit possible in some metaphorical, incomprehensible way. Jump forward 500 years. Now, and jump also from France to Tzfat, to the era of the Mekubalim, of the great Kabbalists in Tzfat. Al-Sheikh HaKadosh, the holy Al-Sheikh, is sitting in Tzfat and writing his interpretation of the Torah. And he is not going Rashi's way. Whether we understand Rashi simply as talking about the actual literal gates, or talking about containing God in physical anything, or in our space, in our human tools, in our human spaces, he's not seeing it like that. He looks at this tension between God and us and says the only thing that can connect us, it's not a building, it's not the gates of the temple. No, what this poem is about, what this song is about the righteous people. Because the righteous, the tzaddikim of every generation, are like conduits. They're what allows God to dwell amongst us. The people who purify themselves through action, through learning, through thought, to such a high level that they can attain a real relationship with God, they become the thing that brings God into our world. Now, I wonder if his own personal experience is part of what moves him to shift attention from the temple to the righteous as a conduit to God, right? Because for Rashi, the temple remained this thing that we're supposed to return to. Now, the Al-Sheikh is already in Israel, but it's so far removed from the reality of serenity and holiness that it's supposed to be. It's still under the control of the Ottoman Empire. People still have to pay bakshish, have to pay bribes for any little thing. Every now and then the Ottoman rulers would let other people come and do pogroms on the Jews, and he doesn't care. He gets money or wealth or success or, peace of mind out of it. He doesn't care. And he lives in this reality. He's like, okay, but being here, the physical reality is not enough. There has to be something extra. So he's like, okay, it's the righteous people. And then he raises a very interesting question where he says, why does it say it twice? If you look carefully at the psalm, you will see that in verse 7, it says, "O gates, lift up your heads up high, you everlasting doors, so the King of glory may come in." And then in verse 8, it says, "Who is the King of glory? The Lord mighty and valiant, the Lord valiant in battle." And then verse 9 almost repeats verse 7. "O gates, lift up your heads, lift them up, you everlasting doors, so the King of glory may come in." The only difference really is, and it's easier to see if you look in the Hebrew, I think the translation here is not clear enough, is that in Pasuk Zayin, you say, Hinas'u pitchei olam, rise up the openings of the world. And in the second variation, you say, Us'u pitchei olam, raise pitchei olam. It's just different tense a little. It's a different binyan in Hebrew. And asks Sheikh HaKadosh, why do we need to say it twice with this little variation? And then he delves really into history, and this is where it comes home to where we're at right now. Says Al Sheikh HaKadosh, we need to say it twice because we had two moments of God dwelling amongst us. We had the first temple and the second temple. And after the first temple was destroyed, there is the real eclipse, a real eclipse of God's revelation, and a real sense amongst people that this is it. The Jewish story is over. So if the psalm would have stayed there, they wouldn't have had any reason for comfort. They wouldn't have had any reason to believe that this will end, that they'll have another revelation. So the psalm repeats itself. And he says these words, and I don't want to read it from the text, I'll just share it with you. He says that when he describes this eclipse of faith, this eclipse of revelation and faith that happens after the destruction, the first destruction, he says, people look at the goyim dancing in Heichal Hashem, in God's home. They look at them dancing in God's home, and they say, Mi ze melech hakavod? Who is this king of glory? He can't exist. He can't be with us if this is what we're seeing. And when I saw these words earlier this week, last week, I should say, when I went and read Al Sheikh here, it shook me in a way it probably would not have shaken me 2 weeks ago, because we have seen Goyim dancing in the home of God. We've seen the Goyim celebrating as they're butchering families in their homes. And we can never unsee this. And once you see this, it must raise a crisis of faith. If it doesn't raise some challenge to God, then we're not sensitive on some level. We lost some of our sensitivity. We can't not question God. We can't not turn to God and say, hello, where are you? Now, I'm not saying then we should just leave everything and walk away. But there has to be a sense of betrayal. There has to be a sense of, perhaps not betrayal, perhaps betrayal is a personal word for me, but absence. Where are you? Ayeka, God, where are you? And says Al Sheikh HaKadosh, this is why the psalm says it twice. The twice there's going to be, because after the eclipse, after the destruction, after this moment of going dancing in the home of God, there will be another time. However, when I read these interpretations, I feel that we need to take a step further than the Al Sheikh did. The Al Sheikh already moved it from the temple itself, from the brick and mortar gates, to the righteous who are the conduit to God. I think that right now we all need to be the gates. It's not enough to say, oh, the righteous amongst us will be the conduits for God. Because when we face the kind of hatred that was natural, sadly, for Rashi, and natural for the Al Sheikh HaKadosh, but should have been unnatural and impossible here in the sovereign Jewish state. When we face this kind of devastation, this kind of hatred, this kind of cruel, for the sake of cruelty, butchery, it's not enough to say somebody will come and save us, somebody will be worthy of God's salvation. We all have to be worthy of God's salvation. We all have to do what we can to bring it about. And some people, like my brother-in-law, are doing it by physically standing and protecting us. But I feel that all of us have a role to play. And throughout this conference, throughout this week, throughout this time, it feels like eternity in a day. It's just hard for me to even capture how much time passed. But throughout this time, I've been asking myself, with every little decision I make, how can I raise us up now? What can I do? Laset et roshi, to raise my head so that our collective head will rise. Sometimes it's a big thing. Sometimes, it means going and helping with some real need that arises, like bringing food from the small things, like bringing food, to bringing money, And I know communities abroad have been amazing in collecting money and equipment for us here, and we're very grateful for that. But sometimes it's even smaller things. Sometimes it's about not looking at my phone and reading more news because I know it will bring me down instead of up. Sometimes it means putting a smile on my face for my children. Sometimes it means not putting a smile on my face on my children, but rather sharing with them how I feel in the way that is age appropriate and will encourage strength and legitimacy for their own feeling instead of making them scared and afraid of what their mother is going through. It's been a million little things, and I can't say I was able to uphold my own standard throughout them all. But I really, looking around me this week, feel that we're all engaged in it. And I want to share with you two little stories about that, about what we've been doing what I've been seeing around me in these past days. One is comical and one is very far from comical. Yet both of them, I think, hold some of that strength of the gates raising their heads to allow the King of Glory to please step into the arena and help us. One happened on Friday. I was cooking up a storm with my children. We were cooking for families who need it. Specifically, there's a family in our shul who had a young, preemie baby. Thank God he's okay and they're okay. But because everybody else is busy helping the soldiers and whatever, they kind of got, usually the community would cook a lot and help a lot, and they kind of got a little bit lost. So we made them Shabbat food, me and a bunch of friends here from the community, and some other projects, whatever. And then another woman who was supposed to collect all the food from all the different and cooked for them and drop it off said, I don't have time to do it. I'm still dealing with this other fundraising for something. I'll send someone to do it. Can you just wait downstairs? So I go downstairs with my daughter and my, several containers and a bag. And I'm waiting for a while. And then a nice woman stops next to me in a car and says, oh, you have the delivery of food for me? And I'm handing it to her through the window when my downstairs neighbor runs out and says, no, this is a delivery to the soldiers that we're cooking for. Don't give her your food. I don't know where your food is going, but this is our delivery. And it was just such a happy moment in a very unhappy week of like, oh, the streets are literally overflowing with people trying to help each other in the most basic of ways. Don't worry, all the food made it to where it was supposed to come. Everything is fine. So that was a comical moment that I think expanded my heart and helped me see how beautiful our spirit as a people is. And the other thing I want to share with you, where it was our strength shone through, is not comical at all. Last night, I had the privilege, I really do feel that it was a privilege, of attending a funeral in Mount Herzl of a young soldier named Amitai Tzvi Granot. Those of you who read Hebrew may know his father, Tamir Granot. He wrote Magid's Hebrew interpretation for Dvarim. He's a brilliant Torah teacher. If you or anyone you know went to Peoria in the 90s, he was a teacher there at the time. His son was killed up north by an RPG missile from Hezbollah. And he's lucky in a sense because everybody knew who he is. They didn't have to wait for a week for him to be identified. And they were taken to, his body was taken to Jerusalem and buried one day later, which is not to be taken for granted. And his grandparents are members of our shul. I don't know them personally because I don't attend a lot, but they're members of our shul. So me and a lot of other people from the shul went. It was 8:00 at night. We waited for a very long time in the mountain because the way army funerals works is different than civil funerals. I don't know if you had the misfortune to see that, but the army funeral is they open the casket in a separate tent for the family to view, and then they do the burial, and then they do the espadin in the same place. And we could hear them screaming. We could hear the family screaming, "Ayar," up in the mountain. And we were standing and waiting in silence. interrupted every now and then by announcements. For example, the announcement of what we should do if there's a siren. And they're like, okay, if there's a siren, you should spread out and lie on the ground. And I look around, I'm like, what are you talking about? We're like sardines here. So many people came, thousands and thousands of people came. What are you talking about? But we're just standing there, and then they come, and hearing the father and the grandfather saying Chodesh was devastating. And then each one of the family members spoke. And each and every one of them spoke about love. They spoke about him, about Amitai, and how loving he was, how he loved everybody, how he loved even people he disliked on some personal level, but he found ways to love them. And they talked about the importance of loving each other. And they talked about how love will win. And one after the other, they said, we are broken, but Israel doesn't have the luxury to be broken. We lost our personal war. We already lost. But the nation as a whole cannot lose, and we need to love each other and be strong. And I want to share with you two particular thoughts, that one from the mother and one from the brother. The mother said that one day, I know that one day we will take the energies of this pain, the energy of this trauma, and we will, and she said it like, I'll say it in Hebrew and then English, we will create, we will build, we will love. Once again, bringing love into the center of it. And one of his brothers said, and it was kind of surprising, he said, I want to share with you a quote that's been with me for a long time and I think about today. And he said, Dumbledore said, do not pity the dead, pity the living, and especially those who live without love. And then he's crying over the grave and he's saying, I don't pity you, Amitai. You wore love. You personified love your whole life. I pity the living, and especially I pity them, your murderers, those awful murderers who don't know love. People like that don't know love. And we will have to eradicate them now. We have no choice. We have to fight and to eradicate them. But I still hope, and I'm quoting him here, that one day they, or maybe their descendants, will know what it is to live with love. And when I hear someone who tells us that he's broken, and yet that's what he's thinking about, and he still has a pity to spare for the murderers, and pity that is not a weakness kind of pity. It's not the pity that comes with, and therefore we should spare them. No, he says we have to fight for them. But his desire is for a world where everyone knows what it is to live with love. His desire is not for a world where we're alive and our enemies are dead. He will fight for it because that's what we have to do right now. But that's not the end goal. And I stood there and crying hysterically with everybody, even though I didn't know Amitai, but it's just like this loss was so real there. And I knew that we as a people will go on raising our gates. We will keep raising our gates. And we will keep doing what we need to do because this is our strength. This is who we are. And this is a war where we're fighting for a right to survive as the people we are, people who believe that the right thing to do is to create and to build and to love. Now, there's several more things I'd like to share with you and some thoughts and some experiences, but I would like to first open it up a little bit for you and ask you to share in a few words, if you wish to. You don't have to, of course, something that helped you this week, something that upheld you through this very, very difficult time. Would anyone like to go and share? Just unmute yourself and speak up because I can't see everybody at the same time. So I can't tell if somebody is trying to speak and I'm not seeing them. Yes, Susanna.
So one of the things that I think is very, very, very important to explain to everybody we know is that not only were these people slaughtered and tortured and abducted, but had I been there, I would have been a target too. But more important, that had they been there, and I don't care what color they were, what age they were, what politics they had, they too would have been a target. We are just the nearest target, but this is really an attack on people. And I think that's what I'm trying to do, to make everybody else feel just a little glimmer of the fear and focus that you need.
Thank you, Susanna. This is a very on point observation. And it really cuts to the heart of it, doesn't it? It's an attack against humanity. I mean, we happen to be, like you said, the battlefront, but just like ISIS before them, it's not. This is not a strategic, kind of thoughtful, interest-driven war of the sort we expect, because we are rational creatures who expect rational thought. This is something else. This is an attack on humanity. So thank you, Susanna, for sharing that. Anybody else wants to share a thought or an experience or something that helped you this week?
Hi, it's Nomi Burstein. I have a dear, dear friend who, up until, well, Motzei Shabbat, was living in Sderot, and he was texting me 2 or 3. I love that we now live in a world where with WhatsApp or with whatever, I can hear from him right away and know that he is okay. And he texted me Motzei Shabbat, his time, still the middle of Shabbat here, to say that they were being taken from Sderot, that they were evacuating Sderot to Yerushalayim, and that he wasn't quite sure where they were going to go because they had promised them hotel rooms, but there was no guarantee that there was actually going to be anywhere for them to stay. But just the idea that, and they found a place and they were fine and they're now safely in Yerushalayim. But just the idea that the key was to move the people out and to get them as safe as possible, as fast as possible. And that, we'll deal with the details of where you're going to sleep afterward. That's just a detail. That's, where you're going to sleep, what you're going to wear, what you're going to do. We're going to get you out. That's what we're going to do. We're going to move you. We're going to put you somewhere safer than you are right now. And we'll deal with all of the details later. And I love that idea. I love that feeling of, we take care of the people first and everything else is just detail.
Yeah, thank you, Nomi. I want to add to that I can say, as someone who lives in a place where people evacuate to Jerusalem, that I'm on these Facebook groups for like Jerusalemites. Every several times an hour, a request would come up. There are families in this hotel and they don't have things and they don't have shoes, and like within seconds it's grabbed. People are just so hungry for something to do that it just, like you said, first let's save the life, and then we're taking care of our own. We're taking care of each other. So thank you, Nomi. And I'm glad your friend is okay, or as okay as can be. Anyone else wants to share? Okay,
This is Diana. I wanted to say I'm grateful for this class.
Diana, I'm grateful to be here with you also. It's very hard to feel alone in this. It's very hard to, and it's isolating because we can't go far now. We need to be close to a safe space, and like every day is a little less confined, but I'm very grateful to be here with you. Thank you. Thank you, Diana. Yes, I see you, Fawn. Is that your name?
I was thank you for this. This is exactly, I know certainly what I needed this morning. I think the one thing, I mean, there have been moments trying to look for them, but one thing that was particularly moving this week was, in our community, many people are, they're printing and distributing and selling Stand With Israel lawn signs. And so I'd sent out an email to my neighborhood, which is not entirely Jewish, mostly, but not entirely. If anybody wanted them, I would pick them up. And I didn't expect to get much of a response. And as expected, a few people said yes. Most people did not. But one of our newer non-Jewish neighbors emailed me yesterday and said, I hope I'm not too late. I would really love one. And, I wrote her back, and I just don't, I was trying to express, and I still couldn't articulate just how much that meant that she was going to put that on her front lawn. It just helps. It helps a lot.
Yeah, no, it's not to be taken for granted at all. Thank you, Fawn. I love your name, by the way. What a beautiful name.
Thank you.
And side by side with less than uplifting responses by many people, it's been beautiful to see that there is a lot of support. And people in Israel like, can Biden be our president next? It's a very unusual experience for us in Israel to go through a painful experience, and the first response we hear is so positive and strong, and it's not just words, it's actions like you described. So I definitely relate to that, and I just hope for our sake, but for humanity's sake, I hope it continues. So thank you, Fawn. Anybody else? You don't have to, please don't feel like I'm putting you on the line. I just want to make sure that if somebody wants to say something, they get to say it. So I'm gonna share some thoughts, but if anyone meant to say something and I didn't notice them, please feel free to just stop me, okay? Or write in the chat, I would like to say something, or something like that. Last Shabbat, I was watching my kids and my sister's younger children in the park, as I've been doing a lot this week to help her. And I was feeling very uplifted because we had a very uplifting morning in our community. We had a bar mitzvah and a new baby. The new baby I cooked for their parents, his parents, for whose parents I cooked, I should say. And we made the executive decision that we are going to celebrate. We're not going to let them steal our joy. Like I said in the beginning about Ifdu et Hashem b'simcha, we're not going to let them take this away from us. So even though, there are people in our shul mourning, like the rabbi mourning for his nephew, and a friend of mine mourning for her cousin, and many, many others worried about their husbands or children, sons and friends. We decided we will celebrate, and it was uplifting. There was one member of our shul who was in Sderot when the attack happened, right next to the police station where the big battle there took place. And he said Hagomel. And the rabbi said before he said Hagomel, he said, you're saying Hagomel for all of us, because the truth is, we're also focused on the devastating things, on the death stories and the kidnapping and the mutilation stories. But so many people's lives were saved. There's so many miraculous, amazing stories of heroism that paid off. And we all have to say Hagomel for that too. So I came fresh from that kind of choosing to live, choosing to be happy, choosing to celebrate the continuity of our covenant and our community, and eating with my parents and singing Shabbat songs with them. And this was where I was at. And then I'm in the park, and this very visibly upset, Haredi or religious, I'm not sure, man was walking by us, and he was yelling at the top of his voice, death to the Arabs, Mavet l'Arabi. And a few boys playing basketball joined him in for a minute, and then he walked away and everybody went back. And what struck me in that moment was that, normally I have zero patience and tolerance for this. And I'm not saying I do now. I have tolerance. Hold with me for a second. But normally I shut it down right away. I say, how dare you? This is not the Jewish way, or something like that. And I still think it's wrong. And when my kids ask me, what did he say and why did he say it? I still explain to them that we don't want to kill all Arabs, and we don't think that killing Arabs will solve anything in and of itself. We want to kill our enemies, and we want to destroy their ability to destroy us. But that's not the same as saying, oh, you see an Arab, go and abuse him, attack him, whatever. So I still hold on to this. But I could also understand where it's coming from, because we all suffered such an impossible devastation that, I understand the desire for revenge. I understand being so angry that you're walking around in the streets of Jerusalem with a red face yelling death to the Arabs. I get it. And I looked at him in pity more than in disgust, as I would have any other day. And suddenly, something we read in shul that every year I have a hard time understanding just went into place. When Cain is rejected, when Cain's offering is rejected in Parashat Bereshit, God tells him this very odd pasuk. Im teitiv s'et, ve'im lo teitiv lapetach chatat rovetz ve'elecha tshukato. If you will do good or do better, s'et, which is a word that is related to s'u sharim rashechem. It's the same, laset, to raise. Something will happen, some sort of uplift or rising. It's not clear what it even means. But if you don't improve or do better, in lo teitiv, you should know that sin is crouching at the door and desires you. And the commentators from ancient times are tying themselves in knots, trying to make it make sense. Some are saying, if you offer a better offering, then I will accept it. Or some saying, if if you're not good, then you'll continue being not good. It's just a very, even John Steinbeck and East of Eden grapples with this pasuk. This is kind of the pivotal point of his whole story. It's such a weird, opaque thing to say. And suddenly it became, and I'm not saying this is the only interpretation, that I suddenly found the golden fleece of Jewish interpretation. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that in this moment, it was very simple for me. Because suddenly this pasuk just described our situation. What do I mean? We are all in a state of distress, a well-earned and justified distress, enormous emotional trauma. Now, if we take this distress and use it to do good in the world, to raise the gates, as I said, to create and build and love, as Avivit Granot said over her beloved son's fresh grave last night. If we cook for others and help others and fight for others and collect for others and fundraise for others and reach out for others and call vulnerable friends and just do everything we can to take this distress to places of doing something good in the world, it will raise us. We will be the one rising, like the gates raising their heads. But if we don't, if we just stay with the distress, on the level of the distress is not going to go nowhere. There are certain built-in natural openings within our DNA as humans that this kind of distress goes to. And grouping them somewhat, kind of broadly, I would say that one is paralyzing despair, and one is the desire for revenge. Rage and the desire for revenge. Now, I'm sure there's many in between, but it's either the desire not to act anymore or the desire to act indiscriminately, if I want to classify it kind of broadly. This is natural. The guy yelling Mamet Lavim, this is not an unnatural, irrational response. It's the most natural response in the world. It's natural for us when someone hurts us to want to hurt them back. It's natural. And therefore it deserves pity, because it's not an abomination. It's just sad, it's just sad. So if we use the energies of the trauma, as Avivit Granot put it, to raise ourselves, to do good in the world, we will raise ourselves above those natural openings in our soul. And we're not going to go there because we'll just be somewhere else. We'll just go beyond their reach. But if we don't, if we stay in the same level, if we don't do good in the world actively, then sin is crouching at the door. It's like the door is right there, and that's the natural door to walk through. And that's what's pulling at us right now. And in that moment, I saw what a huge favor our shul did for all of us by inviting us to do all these things, to help each other, to celebrate together, because it invited us, we all invited ourselves and each other, in a sense, to raise ourselves. And in raising ourselves, we leave behind those natural kind of channels where pain goes into other lives. And this was what Cain missed, this realization that it's not about dealing with a problem. It's not about dealing with hevel. It's not about just wallowing in feeling. It's about just choose to do something good in the world. Just choose to do one good thing in the world right now. And this opaque pasuk became for me kind of a doorway into understanding that this experience we're experiencing collectively now, the experience of doing our best and helping each other and making the right choices and being strong for one another, or when we're feeling weak, giving other people the opportunity to be strong for us, also a big chesed you can do sometimes. We're not just helping ourselves right now. We're not just raising spirits. We're not just keeping morale for the war and ahead. We are fulfilling one of the most primal and ancient commandments, a commandment that pre-exists Jewish people, predates the Jewish people, and that is a commandment to raise ourselves. We were created in the Tzelem Elokim. We received a horrific reminder that people can betray and destroy their Tzelem Elokim beyond belief. And our job is not just to defend ourselves, but not just to fight for our lives, but it's to uplift ourselves and fill the world with more Tzelem Elokim, in a sense, both to fill the places of the people we lost, and because there are monstrous humans in the world who destroy their own Tzelem Elokim with cruelty. So we raise ourselves to make more of it in the world, to make more of what they destroyed in the world. I want to pause again, and once again, before I sum it up, just anybody wants to respond, share something, say anything. Okay, so on that note, I want to do two things. I want to say one thing, just a message for the future, and I want us to say a Tehillim, one last Tehillim together. The thing I want to say for the future is that it's not over. We're facing a marathon, not a sprint. And within this marathon, it's very important to conserve our strength, like to give and do and raise ourselves, but also to control how much we're doing. I learned that the hard way when I kind of crashed and burned the other day. Like, you also have to still be a person, and you have to take care of yourself and be strong and work on having that kind of spine of presence to move forward. And my wish for all of you and all of Am Yisrael is that we will be able to be present, fully present in the days to come, so that one day when they tell our story, right, we're Jews, we're all about the stories. One day when they tell our stories, looking back, it's not going to be a story of, oh, what a big tragedy, oh. It's going to be a story of, wow, we suffered such a terrible hit, and yet look how far we've come from it. Look how much we've built in its ways. Look how much we created. Look how much we loved. So that's my ichul, my wish for all of us moving forward. And with that, let us close with a psalm of prayer for the many people who are fighting or at risk right now, or as we speak, waiting in the border of Gaza or elsewhere in a state of danger, for the many, many, many wounded fighting for their life, and for the mental and emotional healing of the grieving, and of course the retrieval of the kidnapped. Shir ha'ma'alot mima'amakim ka'aticha Adonai. Adonai, shim'a b'koli. תהיינה אוזניך קשובות לכל תחנוני. אם עוונות תשמור יה אדוני, מי יעמוד? כי עמך הסליחה למען תברא. קיוויתי אדוני קיוותה נפשי, ולדברו הוחלתי. נפשי לאדוני משומרים לבוקר, שומרים לבוקר. יחל ישראל אל אדוני, כי עם אדוני החסד, והרבה עמו עדות, והוא יפדה את ישראל מכל עוונותיו. we say here, "Harbe imo pedut," God has a great power to redeem. And turning to God, I'm saying like, okay, God, redeem. You have the power. You have the power. We're doing our best. Please do your best, which we know is everything. So may God redeem us. May we be strong for one another. And I thank you all for being here with me today, for being with us together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Raquel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Talia.
Bye.
Thank you, Raquel. This is so